going into April 1st here. Just finished turn number 5, going into turn 6. Rolled for weather already, and we have rain and mud for the first time in the game. So that's going to make movement very difficult for both sides, except for on the major roadways. So should slow things down a little bit movement-wise. We're starting to get into some tight combat anyway, so I don't think a ton of movement's really necessary. But alright, let's take a look at what happened on turn 5. Bit of action, to say the least. So we'll start with the Chindits. The Chinese have done nothing really, so we'll just take a snapshot there. And Imphaal's been getting exciting, so let's take a look. Alright, so take a look at the Chinese first. Again, nothing really, just this beautiful tree-like shape, this beautiful green line of units. Nothing much yet. These hedgehogged spots are the Japanese forces who are starting to hold up behind a river line in the mountains, so we can't be flanked down that way. And I think going forward they're going to try and look to fortify this side of the river as well. Maybe not want to advance too far. The supply for the Allies actually can only go to that hex there. So unless the Americans make a crossing and attempt to cut off further back or hit the headquarters that's in that hex, then we shouldn't be threatened too much. These trails could be a potential avenue for the Americans to look at as well, but nothing too exciting there. Supplies very limited at the moment, so let's move on to the Chindits. So here we are at Inda. The Japanese, having forced the Allies out of the area in and around Inda, have now fortified and just maneuvered some troops to hold that area a little bit stronger. The Allies were going to attempt an attack on their turn, the second half of turn 5, but just didn't get the DGs on the air barrages that we had hoped for, and just decided against it because of the supply situation, and the noose tightening around Imphaal made us a little bit nervous about supplies, so we could not commit there, and made a little bit of a move. We were attacking in and around this area here, holding those rail lines with the Chindits, but we decided to turn our attention to the north of the valley with great success. The Japanese just before had decided to commit some part of their force that was in and around one of these village hexes up here down towards the center to support the defense there, either attack or something like that was part of their plan. But what happened was it left the hex in the open up here, village hex, underdefended. So we basically turned and shot back up the road away from the Japanese forces here in the center and took advantage of the situation, killing a full step and forcing another to DG and retreat. Now we have not maybe the most well-defended position with the open hexes there, but certainly stronger than we were, I think, down in here. Now we're going to have to force the Japanese to react now. Even bigger part of it is that the rear lines are now threatened in behind the Japanese lines here towards the Chinese. So if the Chindits want, right now, there's nothing in front of them really to stop them from forcing their way towards there. Now, the Chindits wouldn't have any supply really to bring with them unless they can make a move on the airfield there, but that's a long ways away, and I'm sure the Japanese can muster something before we can get there, especially with a poor weather turn now. We won't be moving too quickly. And the Japanese have opted to go first on turn 6, so they'll be able to figure something out there, whether they have to pull forces from there or try and maneuver some of these forces here to get around. They'll have to almost concede the valley here for the moment just to ensure we don't lose the war by losing this front entirely. Could be disastrous if that happens. So see what happens. Very interesting here. So Chindits doing very well. Okay, starting at the south of Imphaal again. Some beautiful tanks sitting in this tank museum. They haven't done anything. I don't have the fuel really to spend on moving them. So they just sit here and look beautiful. Wonderful 2-2-4 tank battalions. So sometime when we can get into some clear hexes, they might be useful, and we're getting up on that in the infall area. So a little bit over to the west, we've now moved up closer to the rear lines of the Allies here. Only defended by an MG battalion right now. We have, I think, 4 counters surrounding that unit right now. The Japanese were going to attack earlier in their turn, but failed a DG, I believe. No, sorry, we did not have anything to make an attempt at a barrage, and with units moving up in reserve mode, decided not to make a play at it. The Allies are kind of just holding out hope that that holds for a little while longer, because we don't have a lot to defend that rear area at the moment. As you can see, it's fairly clear into this area here. What I've done is fortified here because the breakthrough looks like it might happen in this area at the moment. We don't want them shooting up this way or shooting around that way if they do get through in this area. Once the Allies go again, they'll need to restructure this area here and figure out a better way to defend this. But again, trying to keep the Allies out of the valley, or the Axis out of the valley, as long as possible. But as you can see, the Axis are starting to push their way in, so we do have the gap there. As I said, all of these units are going to be pushing up from the Shin'an Pass now. Might be able to mass some factors against some of these brigades that are defending in this line here. The Allies did successfully kill a unit that was in this hex there and kind of shorten their line. That unit was threatening to infiltrate in behind towards this airfield here, so killed that unit, shortened up our line, feel a little bit more confident there. Not a ton of damage they can do on this turn from here. They won't be able to, actually, now that I look at it, they're still a turn or so away from being able to make any threats to the rear area. I was thinking this unit could move in reserve and make something happen, but with the weather, I'm not sure that that's, well, now I'm second guessing. We'll figure it out. I have no idea. And as you can see, some reserves here that are not very well defended, so we'll need to clean up our lines as things are getting a little hairy in the infall area. Alright, so north of infall, things got very interesting as the Japanese reached the roadway. Let me straighten this up here. So, my only worry here is that I committed too early, as we attacked from our jumping off points here, successfully captured a road hex on the first half of turn 5, and was immediately brutally counterattacked by the units here, killing 2 steps and regaining the road. And we're now in a fairly strong position with not a lot of units left in this area to try and recapture. The units that flanked to the south were successful as well. I think traded a step, but managed to get 2 units onto the road via exploitation. But they're not very strong, which is the problem. They weren't able to be reached by the Allies in any force to do anything on the turn, since we have such a shortage of troops in the infall area to hold everything off. I had to reroute the paratroopers here that I didn't know what to do with from this roadway, just to hold the top of our line there. Still, that's not a very strong position either. The Japanese could look to push southward and threaten infall from the north. But I just struggle to see how the Japanese are going to threaten this line again. It looks pretty formidable. We might have to pull back, restructure, and come back in at it again at a later date. Because there's no supply to be had here at the moment either. So if we can keep the pressure on at infall, then maybe we can restructure some things, get some supply rolling, and make another play at it, but no, I'm losing my voice here. So that's it, that's all. We're going to get started on turn 6, and we'll check in shortly. Alright, so turn 6 has been completed. Not a lot of action on the eastern side of the map here. Chindits kind of just held their ground. The Japanese fortifying their positions around Inda there, and putting some forces in the rear of the Chindit positions on the rail line there to attempt to gather some force. Moved up some units in move mode to block the Chindits from progressing any further. Not really much of a roadblock, but slow them down a little bit, and not a lot of supply there for the Chindits, so not really much they can do in terms of pushing into the rear areas of the Japanese there. So, and then up on the Chinese front there, had a successful attack with the Americans and Chinese crossing a river. Successfully had a DG and are now able to attack without the river line in front of us onto the front line of the Japanese positions. So had to lose a Marauder, American Marauder unit, action rating 5 to get that, but we can build from that position there. So we'll take a look over here at Imphal next. The 17th Indian has finally been destroyed, so that road is now clear for us to advance our units through a little more quickly than through the trails. Just restructuring the Allied positions in and around here. Had a bit of a fist fight between the two sides on the turn here. I think total steps lost on turn 6 were 4 Axis steps and 7 Allied steps when we include the 2 lost through attrition, the 17th Indian. So quite a bit. Some foolhardy attacks by both sides, I think, which not great odds, no real great chance of success. The biggest mistake we had, we'll take a look at the Kohima line up here, was this is a soon to be out of supply Japanese infantry battalion dug in. We had an AR-5 and an AR-4 unit, both high attack strength. Made an attack against that Japanese lone unit there, thinking, oh well, we should be able to do this, and then realized, oh, terrain's not great in this area. Then we proceeded to roll 2 1s on our combat roll, and lost both units. So a little bit of an evening factor there in this area. I thought the Japanese were going to struggle, but because of the terrain and the strength in the Japanese defending their positions there, we're able to even the odds a bit. So still 2 Japanese holding the line there, and still have to worry about supply in the Imphal region. So actually I forgot to pay to feed all the units in here, so they're going to be very short on supply come turn 7. So that's essentially it for turn 6, and on to turn 7.